You have never fully fit, and you have never fully understood. Why? Not in your family, not in your friendships, not in the schools you attended or the workplaces you navigated or the social circles that always felt like costumes you were borrowing, rather than communities you actually belonged to. You have spent your entire life surrounded by people and felt, at the deepest level, profoundly alone in a way you could never quite articulate without sounding dramatic. And so you stopped trying to articulate it. You learned to perform belonging instead. But something in you has always known. Something quiet, persistent, and completely certain has always whispered that you are not like other people. Not in an arrogant way, not in a way that makes you feel superior, in a way that makes you feel isolated, like everyone else received a manual for how to exist comfortably in this world, and yours never arrived. Here is what nobody ever told you. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not a failed version of normal. You are an INFJ, the rarest personality type on the face of this earth. Less than 2% of the entire global population shares your psychological wiring. Less than 2%. That means in a room of 100 people, you are the only one. In a city of 1 million, your type number is fewer than 20,000. You have been trying to fit into a world that was statistically, psychologically, and energetically never designed for someone like you. And the exhaustion you feel, that bone-deep, relentless, inexplicable exhaustion of simply existing in daily life, makes complete sense now, because you have been doing something that costs more than anyone around you will ever understand. You have been translating yourself, constantly, tirelessly, without a single break, into a language that was never your native tongue, just to be understood, just to be accepted, just to make it through another day without someone looking at you like you are fundamentally strange. You are not strange. You are statistically extraordinary, and it is time you understood exactly what that means. These 7 signs are not a personality quiz. They are not a fun online test. They are a mirror, precise, unflinching, and long overdue. And if you are a genuine INFJ, every single one of them is going to land somewhere so deep inside you that you will wonder how anyone could possibly know, because this was always your truth. You just finally have the words for it. The first sign that you are an INFJ is one that has defined your entire life in ways you are only beginning to fully understand. You see the end of things before they begin. Not sometimes, not occasionally, consistently, accurately, with a clarity that disturbs even you. You meet someone and within minutes, sometimes seconds, you know, not who they are presenting themselves as, who they actually are. The gap between their performance and their reality registers in you immediately and completely. You know whether a relationship will last. You know when someone is lying, not because you caught them in a contradiction, but because the truth and the lie vibrate at different frequencies and your system distinguishes between them automatically. You know when a situation is going to collapse before a single, visible sign of collapse appears. And people have called this pessimism. They have called it cynicism. They have called you negative, closed-minded, unwilling to give things a chance. But here's the brutal truth. You are not being negative. You are being accurate. And the proof is in every single time you stayed quiet about what you knew, gave it the benefit of the doubt, talked yourself out of your own perception, let someone convince you that you were overthinking, and then watched exactly what you predicted unfold precisely as you knew it would. Your pattern recognition is not a party trick. It is one of the most sophisticated cognitive functions available to the human mind. The INFJ's dominant function, introverted intuition, operates by processing vast amounts of unconscious data and surfacing it as a sudden fully formed knowing. Not a guess, not a hunch, a knowing. And that knowing has been right far more often than the people around you ever gave you credit for. The mindset shift that changes everything. Stop apologizing for what you know. Start trusting it. The second sign is one that has made your relationships simultaneously your greatest source of meaning and your most consistent source of devastation. You love with a completeness that most people are not equipped to receive. When you decide someone matters to you, truly matters, you give them something that almost no one on this planet is capable of giving. You see them, not the version they show the world, not the curated, defended, socially acceptable presentation, the actual person underneath all of it, the wounds they hide, the dreams they've stopped admitting to, the specific shape of their loneliness. You see it clearly, completely, without judgment, and you love that person anyway, fully, without condition. And for the person receiving that, it is the most extraordinary experience of their life. Many of them will tell you, years later, that no one has ever made them feel so completely known. But here is the shocking truth that lives in the shadow of this gift. Most people cannot sustain being truly seen. It is too exposing, too intimate, too confronting. Being genuinely known requires a level of self-advocacy, pretense that most people have not done the work to develop. And so they do one of two things. They become completely dependent on you, addicted to the feeling of being understood, unable to function without your validation. Or they run, they pull back, they create distance from the very depth that initially drew them to you, because living at that level of authenticity is more than they bargained for. And you, the INFJ, are left holding the full weight of a connection that only ever existed completely on your side. Again, for what feels like the 100th time, you did not love wrong. You did not love too much. You loved at a frequency that most people spend their entire lives never reaching. And you cannot shrink that frequency to accommodate people who are not ready for it. The third sign is one that sounds paradoxical until you understand the psychology behind it. You are simultaneously one of the most people-oriented and one of the most deeply private individuals in any room. You genuinely care about people, profoundly, consistently, with a warmth and attentiveness that makes people feel immediately comfortable, immediately heard, immediately safe. You ask the right questions. You listen at a level most people never experience from another human being. You remember details, specific personal details that people mentioned once in passing and forgot they ever told Dia. And people feel it. They feel how genuinely you see them, and they open up to you completely. But then they try to reciprocate. They try to ask about you. They try to turn the spotlight of that same attention back in your direction. And something in you, quietly, instinctively, almost involuntarily deflects, changes the subject, offers a surface-level answer that sounds personal, but reveals nothing, redirects back to them. Because being truly known, rather than being the one who does the knowing, feels dangerous in a way you have never been able to fully explain. Because your inner world is so vast, so complex, so layered, with meaning and contradiction and depth, that the idea of attempting to share it with someone who might not understand it, or worse, might diminish it, is genuinely unbearable. Here is the brutal truth about this pattern. You have become so skilled at understanding others that you have used that skill as a shield against ever having to be understood yourself. You give depth freely. You receive it almost never. And then you wonder why, even in your closest relationships, there is a loneliness that never fully goes away. That loneliness is not inevitable. It is the direct result of a protection mechanism that served you once and is now costing you everything you actually want. Let someone in, all the way, just once. It will change your life. The 4. The sign is one that has probably caused you more internal conflict than almost any other aspect of your personality. You have an ironclad, immovable, deeply personal value system, and you would rather destroy a relationship, walk away from an opportunity, or stand completely alone than violate it. This is not stubbornness. This is not inflexibility. This is not you being difficult or uncompromising for the sake of it. This is the INFJ's auxiliary function, extraverted feeling, combined with their deepest introverted values, creating a moral architecture so precisely constructed and so personally meaningful that betraying it feels not just wrong but physically impossible, like being asked to breathe underwater. You have walked away from things that the outside world considered valuable: relationships, careers, social circles, opportunities, because something in them violated a principle that you could not negotiate around. And people have called you idealistic, impractical, too rigid, unable to compromise. But here's what they fundamentally misunderstood. For an INFJ, integrity is not a preference. It is oxygen. You cannot function in an environment that requires you to consistently act against your values any more than a person can function without air. The compromise they were asking for was not a reasonable adjustment. It was a slow suffocation. And the shocking truth, the one that should validate every difficult decision you have ever made in the name of your values, is this: every time you have stayed in something that violated your integrity because leaving seemed too hard, you paid for it in your health, in your energy, in a quiet, persistent erosion of the self-respect that is the foundation of everything you are. Your values are not your limitation. They're your compass, and a compass that you override is useless. The fifth sign is one that the world has consistently punished you for, and that you need to hear defended clearly and without apology. You absorb the emotional atmosphere of every environment you enter, completely, immediately, without choosing to. You walk into a room and you know the tension between two people who are pretending everything is fine, the grief that someone is performing happiness over, the anxiety underneath the confident presentation, the resentment simmering beneath the polite surface. You feel all of it, simultaneously, involuntarily, as clearly as if it had been announced out loud, and then you carry it, for the rest of the interaction, sometimes for the rest of the day, sometimes longer. People call this being oversensitive. People call this taking things too personally. People who have never experienced it have the extraordinary audacity to suggest you should simply choose not to feel it, as if you were selecting a radio station rather than receiving a transmission you never asked for. Here is the truth, direct, undecorated, final. You are not oversensitive. You are operating with a level of emotional perception that the people criticizing you are neurologically incapable of accessing. Telling an INFJ to feel less is like telling someone with perfect pitch to stop hearing the notes. The sensitivity is not a setting you can adjust. It is the instrument itself. And this is the mindset shift that transforms this from a source of suffering into a source of power. Sensitivity without boundaries is just exposure, and exposure without protection is just damage accumulating over time. The goal is not to feel less. The goal is to develop the discernment to know which feelings are yours, and the strength to consciously choose what you do with the ones that aren't. That is not a small shift. That is the difference between an INFJ who is slowly being consumed by the world and one who is quietly changing it. The sixth sign is the one that has made you simultaneously the most sought-after person in every room and the most quietly exhausted. You give endlessly to others while systematically neglecting yourself. And you have dressed that neglect up in the language of purpose for so long that you have almost convinced yourself it is a virtue. You show up for everyone, completely, without being asked, before they even know they need it. You anticipate needs. You prevent crises quietly, behind the scenes, without recognition, without anyone ever knowing the disaster you navigated around on their behalf. You hold people together during their worst moments with a steadiness and a warmth that they will remember for the rest of their lives. And then you go home, and you have nothing left. And you sit with that emptiness and call it fulfillment, because at least everyone else is okay. Here is the brutal, non-negotiable truth. You cannot pour from a vessel that you have never once allowed to be filled. The INFJ's deepest wound, the one that runs underneath every other pattern on this list, is the belief that their own needs are less legitimate than everyone else's. That rest is indulgence. That asking for help is weakness. That taking up space with their own pain, their own desires, their own requirements for a sustainable life is somehow a betrayal of their purpose. It is not a betrayal of your purpose. It is the only way your purpose survives. An INFJ who is running on empty is not serving anyone. They are performing service while quietly disappearing, and the world does not need your performance. The world needs your presence. Full, sustained, genuine presence. And that is only possible when you treat your own well-being with the same fierce, unconditional care you have always extended to everyone else. You deserve what you give. Say that again, slowly. You deserve what you give. The seventh sign is the one that explains more about your life than perhaps any other. You experience something called the INFJ door slam. And if you know, you know. For years, sometimes decades, you give. You tolerate. You extend grace, compassion, understanding, and endless patience to people who consistently take without reciprocating, who repeatedly violate your trust, who dismiss your depth, who take advantage of your care. You see the best in them long past the point where the evidence stopped supporting it. You stay, you try, you communicate, you hope. And then one day, without dramatic announcement, without a final explosive confrontation, without the warning most people expect, something closes, quietly, completely, permanently. A door inside you that was always open shuts, and the person on the other side of it suddenly finds that the warmth that was always available to them is simply gone. Not angry, not wounded, just gone. And they are stunned, because from the outside nothing appeared to change, but inside you everything changed. The moment of the door slam is never impulsive. It is the final result of a process that has been building for months, sometimes years. Every violation that you processed quietly, every hurt you absorbed without expressing, every time you extended grace that was taken for granted, it accumulated silently, completely, until the internal threshold was reached. And here is the core truth that holds all seven signs together. The INFJ door slam is not cruelty. It is self-preservation arriving, finally, after it has waited far too long. And that is the thread running through every single sign on this list. Every pattern, every gift, every wound, every exhaustion, every moment of profound connection and profound loneliness. You are a person who feels everything, sees everything, gives everything, and has spent your entire life doing all of that without a single adequate structure for protecting yourself while you do it. You were built for depth, for meaning, for the kind of human connection that most people only ever dream of experiencing. You were built to see what others miss, to know what others can't access, to love in a way that changes people permanently. But you were never built to do all of that at the cost of yourself. And the moment you understand that truly, cellularly understand that, is the moment the rarest personality type on Earth stops being its own greatest casualty and starts becoming what it was always meant to be. So here you are. 7 signs. 7 specific, honest, deeply personal truths about the way you move through the world, laid out without softening, without the vague self-help language that sounds meaningful and changes nothing, without the comfortable reassurance that costs nothing and demands nothing. And something happened as you listened. Something in you recognized itself, not in the way you recognize a face you vaguely remember, but in the way you recognize your own reflection. Complete, immediate, undeniable. The first path is the one most INFJs are currently on, and the one this video is asking you to step off. It is the path of the unexamined gift, The path where you feel everything and protect nothing, where you give endlessly and receive almost nothing, where you see the truth in everyone around you and remain willfully blind to the truths about yourself that most urgently need your attention, where you live your entire life at the service of your sensitivity rather than in mastery of it. The second path, the one that becomes available the moment you genuinely own what you are, is something different entirely. The world needs you, specific, whole, boundaried, fully expressed, completely unapologetic, less than 2%. That is what you are. That is how rare this is. That is how unlikely it is that another person with your exact combination of depth, perception, compassion, and vision exists in any given room you walk into. Do not waste that. Do not spend another decade trying to make yourself comfortable for a world that was never going to fully understand you anyway. Be the rarest thing in the room, own it completely, and change every space you enter just by refusing to be anything less than exactly what you are. That is not arrogance. That is the only response worthy of the rarest personality type on earth. Now act like it.